Hi, everybody. I'm Tracy,
And I'm Krista.
and this is Talk Taboo to Me podcast. And today we have an absolutely fabulous guest, Dr. Hassan. Dr. Steven Hassan is a mental health professional and expert in undue influence tactics used by authoritarian leaders and destructive cults. His expertise includes harmful influence in cases of destructive religious and political cults, human trafficking, extremist and terrorist groups, one-on-one relationships, families, parental alienation, mini cults, therapy and self improvement groups, professional and institutional abuse, corporate and multi level marketing programs, and harmful belief systems. He is the author of 4 books, including Combating Cult Mind Control, Freedom of Mind, and The Cult of Trump.
I have a Spanish edition of Combating.
That's amazing.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Well, Steve, um, one of the big things that Tracy and I really wanted to focus on today, you have been in the cult game, if you will, for a long time, over 40 years.
It's almost 50. It'll be
Almost 50
50
years.
in 2026 after my deprogramming from the Moonies. So I've been
Okay.
around.
Wow. Well, we don't want to go into the story of the Moonies because you describe it so well and so detailed in your book, Combating Cult Mind Control. So I highly encourage
Thank you.
anybody to go out, read that. And we really want to know so much more that maybe questions that you haven't been asked before. So my very first question please, is that you have been very open about your time in the Moonies. And I would like to know, what is the part of the story that you still find maybe too raw or complicated to share fully?
About the Moonies? Nothing. You're looking at someone who's had decades of therapy as well as doing therapy with thousands of people. And I just believe in honesty and looking through all the nooks and crannies of my psyche and my shadow side and just like what's in there. And interestingly, my second book, Releasing the Bonds, which is not currently in print, I did a very interesting share that isn't well, and I was exploring the idea of where did my Mooney identity come from?
Mm.
And what I came up with was that, and this I can generalize to clients, and it is useful in doing therapy, but I came to realize there was a very young child part of me that realized that the world wasn't a fair and just place, and that my parents weren't perfect and couldn't answer all my questions. And I got disillusioned. And then you grow up, right? Because it's like, that's not how the world is. And then I grew up, I had a very religious moms and grandma and grandpa that got me involved with Judaism. And I was going to Shabbat and lighting candles and everything. By the time I was bar mitzvahed, I was like, God hardened the Pharaoh's heart and then killed all the firstborn of people and animals. What kind of God is that? And I was like, it's not anything I can relate to. So it was another kind of child part that had a very, very childish view of the religion. Turned out I've learned a lot more that's much more nuanced and understanding religion. But then I also was in the era of the Cold War, where fighting the Nazis and the Holocaust and, then the commies. And so I would watch combat on TV and fantasize about being a hero, soldier, warrior. And then I grew up and I was in the last draft lottery to go to Vietnam. I was like, this sucks. I don't believe in war. I don't want to shoot people. So what I'm trying to describe is that as I grew up, there were parts of my ego and my psyche that I just abandoned. And when I got into the Moonies, they kind of like found those deep childish, parts of me, and they they recruited those parts to become my Mooney identity because I became a heavenly soldier for God, and I was a missionary who was going to, bring God to everyone because Moon was the Messiah. And we could trust Moon because he was perfect and sinless. So he knew everything. So he could make the world the Garden of Eden again. So it was like fulfilling some unresolved childish parts of my psyche. But as far as, what have I not told the public about my past? I mean, I've been pretty blunt. I mean, I've actually said I was 19 to 22 and I never jerked off once,
You've
Yeah.
said it all
because
already.
it was a sin. Weren't allowed to touch yourself. And I had 2 nocturnal emissions in 2.5 years, and I had to report it, of course. And then I had to take a cold shower, condition where I turned purple to repent from my sin because a demon obviously invaded me while I was sleeping.
Clearly.
So I mean, that's about as embarrassing a thing that I've
Yeah.
ever said, but it was like whatever.
Yeah.
I love because Tracy and I are both therapists, and I absolutely love the fact that it shows that all the therapies and talking and getting this stuff out that it works. Because we'll talk to people who have had trauma even before your involvement in the Moonies, and there's still stuff we see within families all the time. There's still stuff they're like, oh, we can't talk about that. Oh, we can't talk about that. So personally, I absolutely love to hear that you're just like, there is nothing. I have said it all. And I think that just shows just how strong and recovered, quite frankly, you are. And I love that you clearly are believing in your work because it worked on you.
Well, and I want to say that I really believe in role modeling as a very essential part of being a good therapist, and one of the lessons I learned in the first 5 years after getting my master's back in 85, because I was taught you don't share your personal details with your client. You have to have healthy boundaries. And I was like, no, I need to share my story so people don't think they're crazy and that they understand where I'm coming from. They'll actually be able to relate to what they're saying. And I just had to, a lot of it was trial and error. I had some great mentors and teachers over the decades, and I go to workshops all the time. I'm a lifelong learner, but you have to like, what's the point? Like, why are you doing this work? You want to empower people, not to stay in therapy their whole life, but to
Yes.
move on.
Yes.
And I made a decision a long time ago. I didn't want to do long-term therapy with people. Have a few exceptions of people that I've been able to follow up with over the years. But I wanted to do a deep, intensive, short-term work and refer people on, then maybe do a tune-up here and there.
Yeah.
I agree because having somebody just be reliant on seeing you constantly so that they can carry on, I don't think that's the point of therapy.
Exactly. And the key thing, as I unpacked everything, was that healthy development, you want a person to have an internal locus of control for their thoughts, their feelings, their behaviors, their choices. You don't want people looking outside to some authority figure, whether it's a parent or a cult leader or a guru or a therapist, to tell them what to think and whatever. So my whole approach is really very psychoeducational and wanting to pick from a toolbox of many different methods and approaches and offer different things to people on how they can heal themselves. And I've met too many Holocaust survivors who didn't even tell anybody about their experiences until their 80s or 90s. And some people never even wanted to tell then. And but they went on to have robust, successful lives, raise families, etc. Not that they didn't transmit some baggage, as intergenerational trauma is a fact in my experience. But in the end, it's like everyone has to have their journey. But I also want to just comment, there's a big difference working with people born in cults than people recruited into cults. So I was really, as I was unpacking my experience about people recruited into cults, but learning how to help people who were born into cults, that was a whole nother animal. I'm just making a metaphor, but it was a whole different process because people would be like, I didn't have a real self. You had a real self to go back to, and I don't know who I am. And here I want to credit my mentor, Daniel P. Brown, who was one of the world's leading forensic psychologists, was the lead expert witness on behalf of the Catholic Church sex abuse cases, where people were saying, yeah, I got abused, but how come you didn't tell anyone for 40 years? It's like, because I didn't remember it. And he was able to demonstrate, aside from other people who did remember it, saying, yeah, I was there when the priest was, feeling you up, whatever. But anyway, Dan taught me to ask the client, when do you feel the most you? And just wait. And then, I don't know. Well, take a stab at it. What comes to mind? When I'm walking on the beach, when I'm with my child, when I'm teaching, and things start coming out. And it's like, okay, let's start there. And by the way, people can grow and change. So you don't have to commit to an identity. And you can look at your neighbors, anyone that you look up to. Oh, my next door neighbor, what a great father and mother. They have great kids. It's like you can borrow qualities from your neighbors or from movies, etc. Because this is life. This is your life. You get to make yourself the way you want to be.
Yeah.
That's absolutely. I love that you said all those things because I say that all the time about so many different things like trauma. I'm like, we can talk about your trauma, but I wonder, what are you going to do now moving forward? Because that's behind you. So wonder what we could do now. Or, yeah, but I had the worst parent. Me too. I learned what not to do. Sometimes you learn what not to do for people, and then you learn what to do from someone else, or trial and error. So
Right. So, I mean, what I've gotten to, because there's a big curve over the 5 decades, from involuntary intervention to conservative intervention to voluntary interventions to what I call the strategic interactive approach. But in the end, after my book got published, the internet got created, people were finding information. We didn't have information back in the 70s. So you could barely find another ex-Mooney unless there was someone in your town and somebody could give a phone number, and it was like a dial phone,
yes,
a rotary phone.
I
Later,
remember those.
yeah, it's like people need to understand. You used to go to the library with the Dewey Decimal System. Is there any books on cults? And it's like, nope, And then Combating came out and it's like, wow, there's actually a book that explains this crap. So it's been an evolution. But where I've gotten to now is just, I really want people to be in their body, because it's really clear that brainwashing is a dissociative disorder. And a lot of people don't know what it feels like to be in their body. So you have to teach them. So that's really critical. I hate to be trite, but the whole notion of be in the now, it's like vital, because our brains are prediction machine, organisms, and the past is a memory. And the future hasn't happened yet, so it's a projection of stuff. But what we have is the here and now. So I'm with you now. I'm staring at a camera and a computer screen, but I'm saying hello and wanting, to share my expertise with people. I'm not thinking about what I'm doing tonight. I'm not remembering what I did this morning. I'm just present in the here and now. And I have values that say, Steve, you enjoy teaching, you enjoy sharing what you've learned, so other people don't have to reinvent the wheel that took you so many years to figure out.
Yeah.
That
Which would
makes
be
sense.
part of the bite model that you created, right?
Yeah, so let me tell you briefly that I credit Robert J. Lifton for my career. It was his 1961 book, Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism, that was used in my deprogramming. My deprogramming took place not because I wanted to leave the group. I was sure I wasn't in a cult, and I was sure I wasn't brainwashing. Robert J. Lifton's Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism, and as a Moonie, I thought we were God and Chinese communists were Satan. And so I'm sure I'd be interested in learning what Chinese brainwashing was. And then we went through the 8 criteria and it fit the Moonies, and that was weird. But the point is Lifton encouraged me after I got out, and I reached out to him. He was like, "You know more than I know. I just studied it secondhand. You should study psychology." And so the critical evolution of the bite model started with his 8 criteria. Then I met Margaret Singer. She later came up with 6 conditions. That wasn't initial. That came out actually after I came up with the bite model. The bite model came out of my reading of Leon Festinger's work, When Prophecy Fails, which was a study of a UFO cult. It was actually a splinter group, I believe, of Scientology. This woman claimed that a UFO spaceship would come down on a mountaintop. And Festinger and his students were curious, well, what happens when the spaceship doesn't arrive on the set time? And to everyone's surprise, people believed more and not less. And he was like, what's the mechanism for this? And he
Interesting.
came
So
up with
completely going
cognitive
against the here and
dissonance
now.
theory. He came up with cognitive dissonance theory. He said when you can get someone to do an extreme behavior, they rationalize it to feel good about it. And that really is an essence of the incremental way cults, recruit and indoctrinate people, is they shift your behavior by lying to you, etc. But so anyway, I started thinking about thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And I started thinking about, what can I take how I recruited people into the Moonies and parse it into those categories? Well, we did sleep deprivation, we did this, we did that, we changed clothing. So I started writing a list, and I was like, this is interesting. And then I was thinking there's something missing, and I was thinking about the fact that I never would have gotten in if I hadn't been lied to. So then I went off on a whole track of information manipulation, not being able to understand things, or tattling on people, or breaking people and taking their personal information that they feel shameful or guilty about and using it to manipulate them. So I did a master's project in 85. I published Combating in 88 with the 4 criteria, but it wasn't until 2000 when I published the bite model. And I credit a Church of Christ mainstream minister, Buddy Martin, who's from Texas. He said, Steve, if you change the order, you could call it bite, and then people could remember it. I was like, wow, buddy, can I use that? And he's like, please do.
What was
So
it?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I think it may have been thought control and then emotion control. And then, what it was just, was not the bite model.
Yeah.
But then it started catching on because people could remember the BITE.
Yeah.
And then, and about 9 years ago, 8, 9 years ago, I've been an activist. I've written books. I've been on TV. I've traveled the world. I've been teaching, and nothing was changing. And in fact, it was getting worse. More people were getting mind controlled. There were more cults than ever. And I came to the realization that the law itself is out of date with understanding how the mind works, because the law says if you're a minor, you can be unduly influenced, or if you're elderly with dementia, you can be unduly influenced. But everything else is a slippery slope, because one man's religion is another man's cult, and who could tell? And I was like, that doesn't make sense, because if you're lying to people to recruit, the group should not have tax exemption status because we have fraud laws, you get arrested if you change the odometer on a used car. How come you can lie and say that you're not a religious group when you're bowing to moon on
Okay.
Sunday morning with your head to the floor? So anyway, I got involved with a forensic think tank at Harvard Medical School called the Program in Psychiatry and the Law. And I did a presentation, and the director of research, a Harvard psychologist named Michael Commons, said, well, if you want to change the law doesn't like qualitative models. It likes quantitative models. And Lifton was a qualitative model as a criteria because he interviewed people. It was not like a numbers crunching thing. He said, you need to get a doctorate. If you if you do it, I'll supervise your research on the bite model. So I said, I'm too old. I'm 63 to get a doctorate. And he said, I'm 77. Do you want to change the law or don't you? I was
Oh
like,
my God.
you got me on that one, Doc. And so I did the first quantitative study on the bite model. We turned every single one of the criteria into a never to always Likert scale. And we began to do scientific methodology. And I'm continuing it, by the way, right now at bitemodel.com, that people can do a free anonymous survey, and it will literally give you a number of how authoritarian or how healthy the group is that you or the relationship is.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
But interestingly, at the think tank, I had some psychiatrists who were like, you can't redefine undue influence. Undue influence has been defined for 300 years, and it has to do with property, and you can't change it. And I was like, yeah, but there's trafficking law. People can go to jail for fraud, force, or coercion. And then I was like, okay, well, that's trafficking. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to do my dissertation based on using those three things, but applying the bite model to how pimps and labor trafficking people do and indoctrinate people. And then again, I got pressure. You just can't change the definition of undue influence. So my mentor, one of the co-founders, said, make up your own terms, Steve. And I was like, I think I'm going to call it the bite model of authoritarian control.
Okay.
So that's the term. And a lot of people use the term coercive control in terms of the UK. It's a gender related control framework. It is undue influence, but it's not robust and it can't be applied to a country like China. My bite model can. My bite model can be applied to a one-on-one relationship too, because it's looking at behavior, information, thought, and emotional control. So my big wish fighting authoritarians around the world is to create a scientific way for anyone to reality test whether they're subjected to brainwashing or not.
That's
And
amazing.
I did a TEDx talk. How can I know if I've been brainwashed? And I
Yeah.
offered a reality testing strategy that people can do for themselves. Because I was sure I wasn't in a cult and I wasn't brainwashed. I didn't feel
Right.
brainwashed. I was,
I,
so it's an
I
interesting life I've had, Krista and
Yeah.
Tracy.
Yeah.
sounds like it. I would
Definitely.
love to know, as you're talking about sort of even just one-on-one control, do you think that the therapy relationship itself can ever become a form of control?
Absolutely.
Therapists say what's healthy or normal for somebody, for instance.
Therapist setting a standard.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are psychotherapy cults. There are commercial MLM cults, large group awareness training cults. They come in so many different forms, but the core features is that someone is getting their will subverted by someone else or some other ideology. When you were talking, Tracy, I was remembering a series called The Psychiatrist Next Door, about a psychiatrist who had basically enslaved his client, had the client cleaning his house, got all of his trust money, and just like took over this person's life. And speaking of, my profession, we really have a problem because there's no universal understanding of theory of mind.
Right.
And I want to credit my colleague and friend Nigel Denning, who's a Melbourne psychologist, and he too was trained by Daniel Brown, using Dan's 3 pillars model and secure attachment repair protocol. He's trying to create a standard that includes, like, what is healthy development? If you have a healthy relationship with your parents, what are the stages people are supposed to go through, and what's the goal when you're fully functioning? What are your capabilities and your tools, and how do you live in the world? And that's
Right.
why we have to think
Mhm.
outside of models, including my models. I'm like, don't get lazy and get stuck in my models.
In
Improve
fact,
my models.
a question I have for you is just learning about the bite model and so forth. I'm seeing that some of the critical comments about it is saying that it's too broad. And so, for instance, like it's saying that it potentially risks labeling religion, politics, or even parenting as mind control. So, how would you say that you draw the line between influence and abuse?
It's called the influence continuum. I
Sure.
talk about healthy influence have these
Mhm.
characteristics: healthy relationships, healthy leadership, healthy organizations. And it's a continuum. It's not a binary. So it's not all great or horrible. Most groups are in the middle somewhere where they have questionable practices and such.
Hmm.
And I have some very clear things. Like, I believe that adults should be able to read whatever they want to read and talk to whoever they want to talk to, even if it's a former member or if it's a journalist who's done a deep dive on my group. You should be able to have access to that information and analyze it for yourself and ask follow-up questions. So
Hmm.
a healthy group allows you to follow your critical thinking, your free will, encourages people to change their mind if they want to. And if you don't like what you're in, you leave. Healthy groups go, good luck, stay in touch.
Yeah.
Unhealthy groups are like, you're going to be possessed by demons.
Yeah.
You're gonna kill yourself, or you're gonna be run over by a car, your plane's gonna fall
Right.
from the
I could
sky.
think of a ton of examples of unhealthy groups, but what's an example of a healthy group?
There are more healthy groups than unhealthy groups.
You know, it's
So I
funny.
don't
Good
know.
to
Can't think
know.
of, I mean, I could think of some, but also at the same time, where am I getting that information from? Because we are in such a heavily influenced society already that I don't want to say that I think this is healthy. When I, quite frankly, from what you're discussing, I don't know if I've been influenced to think that this is a healthy group. So I'm curious, based on your expertise, what is healthy?
So, again, it's a matter of relativity. But when people ask me, I say, I love TEDx. I love watching them. I love learning, and I love giving them. And I even wrote a fun blog saying I joined the cult of TEDx. And I mean it. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's really great.
Yeah.
And I also give the example that I was interviewed by a guy who said, my editor said I have to interview you for a book I'm writing. I said, what's it on? He said, computers. I said, that's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. What's the name of the book? He said, The Cult of Mac. And I laughed and I said, well, I'll do the interview, but I've only been using Apple products since 1982. currently have 3 iPhones, 3 iPads, 3 iMacs. And so I'm in the book as a devotee of the cult of Mac. That was before Isaacson's book came out on Stephen Jobs and described him as a narcissist. I had no contact with him. I just knew way back when computers entered, I had a phobia of them.
Mm.
But Macs are easier to learn and more friendly and more intuitive. I'm
Agree.
also a scuba diver. Like, I love scuba diving. Show me videos of fish and reefs and sharks, and I can have a conversation with anyone around the world about scuba diving at any time. And I spend a lot of money going places to go scuba diving and risking my life, even though it's pretty safe if you do it properly and you have good equipment. But I could go on and on. People love, breeds of dogs. They love, crocheting. They love mahjong. They love, their sports teams. Or they love Taylor Swift. I've been asked several times, are Swifties an occult? And I'm like, definitely. It's called a fandom.
You heard it here first.
They know her music. They know the lyrics by heart. They'll spend fortunes to go to her concerts, but nobody's coercing them or lying to her. And if they get tired and they want to follow someone else, nobody's going to shame them or blame them.
That's a fandom. I wouldn't say that's a cult. That's a fandom. They're not, no, like you said, nobody's literally threatening their life saying you have to listen to Taylor Swift or anything like that. That's a choice that they're doing with free will.
Right, but it's a group. It's a group of, people who are like Swifties. They're like, yay. Which concert did you go to? I mean, I've listened to these conversations and it's like,
Yeah, so that's a healthy group.
More healthy groups than not. And I think that let's have some clarity here. Are you being respected? Do you have free will? Do you know what you're getting into? If you're donating money, do they give you accountability for where they're spending the money? Is there transparency? If the leader is caught lying, does he apologize and promise not to do it again?
For sharing the healthy groups, because I think so much in our society we're being told of like, look out for this and this and this and this and this, like these are the bad things. Like I think of in regards to just like sexuality, we're continuously told what is bad that we don't know what's good. So I think it's really healthy to also realize like what are the good stuff. And like you even talking about just the different hobbies and everything, I think so many times people forget that these are the healthy groups that we can be a part of. However, of course, if somebody is saying, hey, Steve, I want you to go scuba dive in this area, because if you don't, then I'm going to threaten your family. Obviously, that's very conflictual, but that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. Oh, so again, it's a matter of, I'm just the guy. Yes, I'm a cult expert. Yes, I'm a forensic expert, but when you're a forensic expert, you have to have data. You have to be able to explain where did you arrive at this decision or not. And my work was based on Chinese communist brainwashing models by former Air Force and Army intelligence officers trying to figure out what do we need to know to protect our troops and our people. But now I get to blame our government because they've never been honest with the American people that brainwashing exists and what is it and how to protect yourself. It's what I've been trying to do privately is say, hey, everybody, this is a public health emergency. We're under psychological warfare assault by other countries and by bad actors, Nazis and Christian nationalists and other extremists. And we have to be alert and watch out for our family and friends.
Oh, yeah.
Not just like and share things that fit our model of reality, because there's so much AI generated crap now.
Yes.
So true. So true. What do you think that most people get wrong about cult members? Like, what is the biggest myth you wish the public would drop?
Yes. Why did Steve get in the Moonies? He was weak. He was stupid. He was uneducated. He didn't come from a good family. He didn't have proper religious education. So this blaming the victim that there was something wrong with me, instead of my girlfriend dumped me, 3 women flirted with me and lied their faces off, and I was the victim of a systematic social influence process that was
Right.
very sophisticated. And that's in social psychology, this is called the fundamental attribution error. Have you ever heard that term?
Yes.
Yep. Because when people try to understand people, they have an unconscious bias to overestimate disposition or personality and underestimate social influence.
Yep. We're all trying to
And
figure out everything and trying to understand why certain things are the way they are.
Mhm.
yep. So that's the biggest thing, is that have humility, and honestly, I don't know if it hadn't happened to me that I would be humble about it.
Yeah.
Because I was an arrogant punk at 19. I had bicycled cross country. I was an extra honor student. I was 6 feet tall and, popular of a sort. And it was like, nobody's going to make me do anything I don't want to do.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And then I'm bowing to the floor thinking the Messiah's on earth because I've
Yeah.
been sleep deprived and hypnotized into accepting this nonsense.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I'll just mention. There's a myth that you can't be hypnotized to do something you wouldn't ordinarily believe or want to do. It's
Mhm.
something that all stage hypnotists say and lie about because they want people to volunteer to come up on the stage, but you can get people to do things they would never do
For
on
sure.
stage or anywhere else.
Sure.
Absolutely. I took several courses in hypnosis in grad school, actually. I was just
Mhm.
curious about it and learned about neurolinguistic programming and,
Mhm.
how to slip things in when people don't know. Of course, it was to be helpful. I learned it from the helpful stance, but you can
Yeah.
see how that can be twisted and used in ways that are very unhelpful.
So I'm going to take a moment and comment on that one, Tracy,
Please
because
do.
I became obsessed when I got out to try to understand brainwashing and mind control. So I really started reading book after book: persuasion, attitude change, social psychology, sociology, etc.
Mhm.
And there was something missing, and I didn't know what it was. And social worker friend of mine said, "Hey, Steve, I'm going to a hypnosis workshop this weekend. You want to come along?" And I'm like, "What's that? Like, who's teaching it?" And oh, it's something called neuro-linguistic programming. It's the hottest thing. This was 1980.
Wow.
This was 1980. But aside from going to classes as an undergraduate, I'd never been to a workshop since my Mooney time. So I was a little paranoid.
Wow.
And
Interesting.
I agreed to go. I paid my money, but I was in the back of the room pacing back and forth because I didn't want to sit. And they were talking in a very special way at the very front
Yeah.
of the room. And I was like, I used to do talk like that as a Mooney
I
leader.
bet.
But in the Moonies, they didn't say, we're going to teach you how to hypnotize people. They paired you up with older brothers, and they had me sitting in lecture after lecture till I memorized how to do the lecture. And
Yeah.
it turned out that I am able to be hypnotized, and I was a good learner. But I knew that Richard Bandler, who was teaching, was a psychopath immediately, but I
Mm.
was fascinated at what he was doing. So anyway, I did a deep dive into NLP. I was trained as a trainer. I was even invited by John Grinder, the other founder, to move to Santa Cruz to be his apprentice. I
Wow.
had gotten married. My wife at the time and I went out there, and then they had a split up, Bandler and Grinder.
Mm.
And they started changing the focus of NLP from teaching teachers and therapists to salesmen and CEOs. And
Mm.
They were having people do exercises at how to covertly manipulate people and how to like go up when you're at a dime store. They don't call them dime stores anymore. I guess it's a $10 store where you pretend to give them a $20 bill, but you give them a 10, but you do a confusion anchor and you ask for more change than you actually gave them. And I'm like, I'm out of here. This
Yep.
is so unethical. I want nothing to do with this bullshit. I'm
Oh my
done.
God, like a
It's so
sales
fascinating.
coat.
But then I was like, I want to learn the real hypnosis. It was all based on Milton Erickson. So I learned about the Erickson Foundation. I said, I want to learn. They're like, you don't have a master's in psychology, so you can't come. And I'm like, I want to learn this. So that was part of my motivation to get my master's in psychology, because I was fascinated at this whole how does language change images and emotions, and if it's done ethically, it's one of the most powerful methods on earth. It's certainly what Dulles found in the MK Ultra research. One thing that worked was hypnosis.
Yeah.
The LSD didn't work, the electroshock didn't work, and all that, but hypnosis worked, and it's being used rampantly on the internet.
Yeah.
This whole
Well,
ASMR is all hypnotic
Yeah.
techniques to
yeah.
induce altered states. And what I want to say to your listeners is there's nothing wrong with an altered state, but you want to be in control of it.
Yeah.
When you're
Yeah.
in a hypnotic state, you're more suggestible to external influence. So if someone has an agenda, it will slip past your critical faculties. Now, in my professional life, I've had to learn about all these different gurus and the techniques they were using. Keith Raniere did NLP, you
Yep.
know. Hubbard was a hypnotist. A lot of people don't know that Scientology is based on hypnosis, but it
That doesn't
is.
surprise me.
But, in my work, I had to develop an ability to go into trance, but stay meta, to stay
Oh yeah.
critical and analyze. But I
Yep.
also hit the pause button whenever I'm starting to lose it, because you have to keep your attention.
Yeah. You can't just disappear into your hypnotic state and let someone else take over. That is absolutely. After I learned a lot more about that, it took a couple of years of training and whatnot. I became very much like I'm very aware of when somebody's talking to me and starting to get, seductively
That's the
hypnotic.
key, is being self-aware. Because
Yes.
when people are trying to trance me, my alarms go whoop.
Yep.
Oh, somebody's mirroring me from that
Yeah.
table over
Yeah.
there. Who the hell are they? What's their agenda?
I gotta step
Yeah.
in and say this real quick because I was going to ask a completely different question, but then we started getting into the hypnosis stuff. So I was trained how to do hypnotherapy about 8 years ago. And I'm not going to say where because I had a great experience. But after talking about this, I had always wondered because I thought it was really weird that, you said that you had to get your master's. There was no qualifications for anybody to sign up to learn to do this. And it was primarily for hypnotherapy, not necessarily stage hypnosis. And I remember there were people from all over the world at this training. There were people in finance from Singapore. There were people like all over the world. And you talking about this just makes me think like, that's really scary to me,
Yeah.
from the therapeutic model to think, we're utilizing this to be able to tap into an area of the subconscious to heal the ego, to work through things, especially if you're doing like ego regression work, which is, going back into the childhood and really, working through that. But that's
I'm
really
very
scary to
well
me
aware.
that, yeah, it's really scary to me that, thinking about the fact that I was doing this with a bunch of business people. And that's nuts
Yeah,
to
and
me.
there's a stage hypnotist right now. I want to say his name is McKenna, Terrence McKenna, who I heard Tony Robbins taught how to do a coaching business, and I think it's called Mind Valley or something. And he's going to teach people how to do hypnotherapy who have no training in mental health. And it's like
Fascinating.
shocking and disturbing.
It's irresponsible. But I
Yes.
had a friend recently in the last couple of years who's not a therapist, is not trained who was like, I'm going to a hypnotherapy workshop. And I said, don't. He goes,
No.
why? I said, because you shouldn't, because there's nothing that you're going to learn that you're going to come out of there and be able to do something productive. He says, but you learned
Yes.
hypnotherapy. I said, yes, as part of my grad school training. And there were clinicals, and we had to do a bunch of things, and we had to know how to apply it and when. And we learned a lot of things about
Mhm.
Erickson and all these things. And
Right.
you just
And you have ethical guidelines as a therapist
Yeah.
that are very
exactly
strict. And you have
licensing
a
board.
board that will
Yeah.
hold you accountable. Clinical
There we go.
hypnotherapist,
Yeah.
if you have a problem with chronic pain, like it's better than pills.
Right.
Mhm.
Learn. I mean, it's really an underutilized expertise. But
I agree.
yeah, so anyway, I could go
I
on and on.
agree.
I
Yeah.
do want to make a comment, if I may. I don't do hypnotherapy with my clients by
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah. I
And I
don't either.
made that decision a long time ago because I want people to trust me. I don't want
Yep.
people to wonder, am I doing a maneuver on them? I'm very transparent. I will teach people how to do self-hypnosis. I will
Yep.
show my clients videos of stage
Mhm.
hypnotists like Darren Brown and explain the techniques he's using on people. But I can refer people to clinical hypnotherapists who I know are going to be responsible.
I agree.
And I've had clients offer me large sums of money to just covertly hypnotize their person out of a cult, or crying to me. I had a psychologist crying to me that I should
Mhm.
use hypnosis, and I wanted to help them, but I also was like, I need to draw a line in the sand for myself
Right.
because I want to
Absolutely.
sleep at night. I want
Right.
to, when my life is over, not have regrets.
Mhm.
And I'm not perfect and I can't help everybody. You know what I'm saying? The thing is, you
Absolutely.
have to know what you're comfortable doing, what you're not comfortable doing, and be transparent with your clients about it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. Yep. I've done it less than 10 times with clients when there were very specific reasons and requests. And I said, well, we
I
can
did
try
do
for a
it
couple.
way back at the beginning when I was learning NLP and then I was
That's
getting
when
my
I did it.
master's. I did. The most famous one, Krista, you were asking me about, things that I may not have told anyone. This is a
Yeah.
quick story about actually the man who's now my current virtual assistant. I helped out of a cult like 35 years ago, and he's
Wow.
been working part-time for me for the last couple of years, but it was not an overt hypnotic intervention. I had worked with the family. We got him into a room where he agreed to meet with me, etc. And I learned a long time ago, you never tell someone who thinks they had a spiritual experience that it wasn't a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
You offer an alternative interpretation of their experience and ask them to think about it and such. Jim had been in Zen Master Rama cult, and that cult, the guy was a hypnotist and would say you have to meditate, but he was teaching people to listen to his voice doing the meditation. And he said, when you're ready to meet your teacher, you'll see a golden light emanating from the teacher. And so when
Fascinating.
I met Jim, I said, so Jim, what made you decide to commit your life to Rama? He said, oh, the golden light. And I proceeded to say, Jim, I know that's a very profound experience, but with hypnosis, that can be replicated. And he said, no, it wasn't hypnosis. It was definitely a spiritual experience. And I said, well, but can't you consider the possibility that it is something else? And then he leaned into me, he said, prove it. And I was like,
Mm.
now what do I do, Steve? What are you going to do now, buddy? So anyway, I went with it and I said, okay, Jim, I want you to close your eyes and meditate the way. And I didn't do the voice. I didn't do the velvety voice. I just said, Jim, I want you to close your eyes, and I know how to do it. As I said, I want you to meditate the way Rama taught you to meditate. He closed his eyes, and this is what I said. I said, I want you to go deeper than you've ever gone before. And then I said, and I don't want you to open your eyes until you're fully ready to see an even brighter light coming from me. So I did in hypnosis what's called a double bind technique. I'm going back 35 years that he did this. So he opens his eyes, he goes, whoa, that's even brighter than Rama. That's it. I'm out.
Yep.
Wow, just like that. That's impressive.
It was, but I
Impressive.
would never replicate that because,
Yeah.
again, I want to be careful. So I try to, but the point is I did a maneuver on him. I made him believe that he had to keep his eyes closed for the rest of his life or open it and see a bright light from me. So he chose wisely and opened his eyes and saw the brighter light.
Well, I'm glad he was able to do that. Well,
But-
hey, Steve, we have one more question because we got to wrap things up here.
Sure.
Otherwise, I think we could potentially be doing this for 5 more hours. All right. I have a question that's completely just out of the blue, completely random. And this is coming from a place where I love documentaries. I watch documentaries probably, I would say, one a day. I love them. And I think about a documentary I saw years ago, and it was about Charles Manson. And he had a quote about how he would deliberately get people into his family. And going into what you had said about, Tracy's question about the myths of, what do people get wrong about cult members? Well, I'm going to quote him and then I'm curious what your thought is. He had said, when asked, how do you get people into the family? And he had said, well, I'm looking for people who are bruised, not broken. What are your thoughts about that?
So what I want to say to you is that my dear friend John Atack, who is a former Scientologist, went up the bridge to OT5, has written the best books exposing Hubbard as a hypnotist, has been working on a book on Manson, and it turns out Manson had 150 hours of Scientology hypnotic training.
No kidding?
And if you know anything about Scientology, they have a training routine at the very beginning where you sit with it's hypnosis. You sit with your feet flat on the ground, your hands in your laps, eyes closed, just being there. That's step 1. Step 2 is staring into the eyes of a Scientologist and not moving like this.
Creepy.
Yeah.
But then they do bull baiting where you have to stare and the Scientologist tries to distract you, etc. Manson had hours and hours of this training. And when you see his eyeball crap and giving commands, that's straight out of Scientology programming. So he had a very problematic background. He was pimping women and trafficking women, etc. But everybody's missed the point about Manson. There's so many books and so many documentaries, and John is he doesn't have the book finished, but he's really gotten the source documents. And in Scientology, they have you go back to remember your past lives, even if you don't believe you have a past life. And guess what? Charlie remembered he was Jesus.
Oh, that's convenient.
How
Yes.
convenient.
He was
Yeah.
Charlie's Jesus. So anyway, what do I think about Charlie Manson saying he doesn't want broken people or bruised people? I don't think very much of Charlie Manson, but I can tell you everyone's got bruises. I don't know any human being that doesn't have bruises, whether my dog Middy got hit by a car when I was a child, and it was traumatic. Like, that was one of my worst traumas as a child, was my dog got hit by a car and died, Then later, my grandmother died. That was traumatic. But that's life cycle events. This is part of the living experience that everyone has to go through.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and that,
Well, this is
if that's the case and everybody is bruised, then everybody is susceptible. And I think that that's a really good way to just even say, you know what? Let's end there, because I think that that's overall probably the most taboo thing that we could take away from this, is that no matter what we say, hear, read, whatever, anybody can be coerced, anybody can be influenced. And we're literally in a world right now that's running on a lot of influence. So any last words, Tracy, Steve, anything?
I want to say, I want people to understand if something is legitimate, it will stand up to scrutiny. Do your research before you go away or give money. Like, do your research. Create a trust pod with trusted family and friends, and you can say, I'm thinking of going to this workshop. Can you be a contrarian and tell me why I shouldn't? And if you go somewhere and it isn't what you thought it was, leave. Don't go, oh, I paid already and they won't give me a refund, so I'm going to stay. And your mind is precious and your time is precious
Absolutely.
nowadays with the internet. You just have to understand also there are bad actors that want to create chaos.
Absolutely.
They want to get in your pants. They want your money. They want you to kill yourself. I mean, there are cults that are trying to encourage people to take their own lives. And it's like self-regulation. I don't feel good watching this person. Turn it off.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's my words. Love is stronger than mind control.
I love that.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Be on the lookout. Be on the lookout. And because it comes in different packages. I was going to college my first semester, and there were some Bible study people that were like, hey, do you want to join us at lunch? And I was like, oh, I don't really follow all that. They're like, you don't have to. It's like, oh, okay, sure, because I don't really know anybody. And then within 3 days, there were people at my door. There were people trying to baptize me into their thing. And I was just like, wow, that sounds like a cult. Tell me how this is not a cult, because all I did was agree to do this. And I already told you that I don't want to study. I'm not interested. I don't like church. I'm not interested in going to church. And they're like, you're going to hell if you don't get baptized by this
Sounds like the
weekend.
Boston Church of Christ or the International Churches of Christ.
It was probably and I was like, nah, I don't think so, because it sounded so creepy so fast.
Yeah.
But I can imagine if they were smoother about it, that it could have gone a different direction. They weren't very smooth. They didn't have trained professionals that were hypnotizing me, luckily. They were just hot
you
college
knew your
students.
boundaries too, so kudos to you.
Yeah, thank goodness.
Thanks for having me on.
And thank you so much for
cover
being
enough
here.
taboo topics?
We did. I think people are going to learn a lot.
Great.
Yes.
Thanks so much
absolutely.
for having me.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank
Yep.
you.